many times have you sat in a PD meeting that didn't apply to you? Maybe one where you were learning an 11-letter acronym for a strategy you'd never use, or a 3-point plan for a new program that wouldn't fit with your curriculum. Maybe sitting in a training that you'd already had. In other words, a PD meeting that was irrelevant. In their book, Disrupting Thinking, Why How We Read Matters, Kylene Beers and Bob Probst use one word to describe a key component we need in our curriculum in order to keep our students' attention, and that is relevance. Relevance hit home for me conceptually. It goes with so much that I've thought about and written about and podcasted about here over the years. I've argued for authentic audience, more contemporary texts featuring diverse voices, real-world projects like Genius Hour and podcasting, exploring modern mediums, and featuring as much as possible student voices and student questions in discussion. Relevance, in the words of the latest fun visual trend over on Instagram, fits the hashtag vibes I bring to the function over here at Spark Creativity. I want relevance for you, of course, in your professional learning, and that's why I'm here. And I also want it for your students in their learning in your classroom. When Kylene Beers and Bob Probst polled high school students across the country on what issues they'd like to explore at school, the issues that really feel relevant to them, they named things that we might name too, like solving hate and bullying, fighting racism, ending discrimination around mental illness, and protecting the environment. But it's not easy to dive into these types of issues wholeheartedly when you're tied to an aggressive standardized curriculum. Beers and Probst got into this. On page 116, they talked about how it's easier to create a learning environment that matters to students, quote, if the question begins, what do kids want to know, rather than what does the curriculum say we must cover, end of the quote. And yet, even if you aren't free to go fully into these types of issues that students would be excited to learn about, there are inroads you can make in your classroom toward relevance, while at the same time you're maybe having larger conversations with your colleagues and your administration about how you design your units and what topics you have to cover or get to cover. So today I want to explore some ways to build more relevance into the curriculum, even if you don't have total freedom to teach whatever you want, however you want to. Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, a podcast for English teachers looking for more creativity, more engagement, more joy. And no more scripted curriculum, lesson planning ruts, or boring book lists. I'm Betsy Potash, and I'm honored you're trusting me to help. You're not alone on this creative journey anymore. Let's start with Genius Hour. Genius Hour gives students the freedom to choose a project that they've always wanted to pursue. And I want to argue that this makes it fundamentally relevant to them. It's a project you can build in anywhere, in a week, with 30 minutes every Monday for a semester, with a spare 2 weeks after testing and before a certain book you're going to roll out, etc. The idea, pioneered by Google, who called it 20 time, is to give students a chance to dive into projects of their own choosing. Students who are passionate about the big problems facing the world, like the ones we talked about in the introduction, can design projects around understanding them better and making an impact. Students wishing they could start focusing their energy on the field they eventually want to work in can dive in and get their feet wet. Students wanting to learn a new skill can finally have the time to learn that new skill. For many students, Genius Hour is a chance to develop what David Kelly calls creative confidence in my favorite TED Talk of all time. I'm going to link it in the show notes. Please watch it. Creative confidence lets you see an issue in the world and then believe that you can do something about it. Believe that with your skills, your passion, and your creative approach, you can figure out a solution. What a wonderful thing for our students to have, right? In Genius Hour, students choose what to explore, how to explore it, and how to showcase what they've learned. Along the way, they have a chance to build this creative confidence and learn to tackle the challenges directly in front of them. To me, Genius Hour really fits the definition of this idea of relevance. Another way to build relevance into the student experience is to give students more choice over what they read in our English classes. Adding more book clubs, more choice units, and independent reading into your curriculum will automatically push students toward reading material that is more likely to matter to them, and therefore more likely to keep them engaged in the long term in class. With book clubs, you can curate a lot of different voices that you believe are going to be impactful for your students, and then let them choose the one that feels most important to them. You still have some control over it, but they have a lot of choice. With independent reading, again, you can provide a whole bunch of different possibilities. You can do some curating, but then you can let your students explore and discover who they are as readers with your influence and the influence of their peers in the classroom all around, kind of helping to guide them. As you build that reading culture in your classroom, they'll be choosing and they'll be learning from their choices. If you run a choice unit or a reading workshop, you can help students learn about the things that you think they need to know, the writer's craft moves, the text structures, the ways to discover deeper meaning in the texts. You can do these things together even when they're not all reading the same books. I recently read Jared Amato's wonderful book, Just Read It, which I'd really recommend if you want to move your classroom toward a more overall choice-focused curriculum. Nancy Atwell's The Reading Zone is another helpful take on reading workshop, and so is Donalyn Miller's The Book Whisperer. There are really a lot of teacher leaders out there who have given this subject their attention. So if you're excited to really give students choice over the majority of your curriculum, you might want to explore some more books on building reading workshop in class. Okay, next, let's talk a little bit about building units around authentic audiences. This is not a new topic for us. I think it's a really important topic because it's a key way to make learning feel relevant. When students are teaching others, sharing a performance or a piece of art, creating change in their community, maybe persuading leaders about something that's important to students, all of this feels fundamentally different than turning in a piece of homework for a grade. Even if these projects will eventually receive a grade, likely that's not the main thing that students will get from them. And that gives it a different type of relevance in my mind. Next, let's talk about leveraging modern mediums with student choice over the topics. I always laugh about the fact that I studied English, then became an English teacher, then used my English skills to share English teaching ideas with English teachers through Englishy mediums like podcasting, writing articles, blogging, writing social media captions and emails, creating videos. It's also meta, and it gives me kind of a unique angle on some of the mediums being used in communications these days. Mediums that are so very relevant to folks trying to share ideas in the world today. And that brings me to my fourth gateway to relevance, leveraging modern mediums. So sure, the 5-paragraph essay isn't dead, but it's not the end-all, be-all of sharing ideas today either. When we open up the chance for students to practice their ELA skills through the mediums that they are seeing all around them, like podcasts, documentary films, social media style videos, and carousels, we give them a chance to create in mediums that they're more likely to see as closely connected to their daily lives and their future careers. Yes, relevance. The great thing is it's so easy to build the skills we want students to practice into projects in these mediums while freeing up students to choose their own topics. We choose the skills, they choose the topics. A podcast, for example, can demonstrate strong storytelling or argument while focusing on practically any issue students want to dig into. They're really excited to learn more about global warming and how we can change things in our environment. Boom, they can create a podcast around that. They want to dive into issues of bullying at the school and how students can create change. Sounds like a great podcast to me. Let's look at another one. A documentary video can demonstrate the skills of interviewing, scripting and recording audio, editing clips into some logical order, and effectively making points through both the visuals and the storyline, while focusing on pretty much any subject that's fascinating to a student. A documentary project can be about anything as long as you can shoot video footage of it. All right, I could go on. We could talk about more modern media projects and how relevant they can feel for students, but I know you have the idea. So last but not least, let's give a nod here to student-led discussion. There's actually a whole chapter in Disrupting Thinking about the types of teacher-led discussion that Kylene Beers and Bob Probst experienced as students and then experimented with at the beginning of their teaching careers, and why they feel that type of teacher-led discussion doesn't work. Once again, I find myself very much on the same page with these authors. If you've been around here for a long time, you know how deeply I believe in centering student voices with Harkness discussions, and I've seen others do wonderful similar things with Socratic Seminar. When you put students' ideas, questions, and connections right in the very center of your classroom discussion, you're again giving them the chance to create relevance for themselves. What would you think if in a faculty meeting, the leader just opened up the floor to teachers and said, what's going on at our school? What do we need to talk about? The floor is yours. And teachers just had a chance to talk to each other. This is what I'm noticing. This is what I need help with. What are you doing about this? How can we fix this? And it came from the needs and opinions of teachers instead of always from the outside. I think that's what we do for students when we give them the opportunity to do student-led discussion. Now, it doesn't just magically become perfect, as you know, as I know. It takes a lot of time and attention to help kids learn to ask questions that really matter to them, to help kids learn to listen to each other's views carefully and respectfully, to help kids learn to make connections with what's happening in the world and across their other subjects. But it's so worth it. It's so amazing when it works. And it does provide, again, this theme that we're talking about today, and that is relevance. When students are driving the conversation, how can it not be relevant to them, right? As long as we help them get past that sort of layer where they think they're playing school and they're like, what theme did you notice in the text last night? And what text evidence can you provide to back it up? I mean, those questions are great. Don't get me wrong. That's part of student-led discussion. But another part of it is like, did you agree with this character's choice? Is that what you would have done? Like, is that what our president just did? Or, when they start to make those connections to their own lives, to the world around them, that's when that relevance really comes into play. All right, my friend, there are so many ways to help school feel relevant to our students, and I know that you're already doing a lot of them. As always, though, thanks for letting me brainstorm more ideas alongside you. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay creative.